If first in the word firstborn means only precedence in time, and if creation means the original creation of Genesis 1, then the case for Christ's personal preexistence must stand. If both of those things are true, if firstborn can only mean precedence in time, and if the creation in view here is in fact the original creation of Genesis 1, then we must agree in the personal preexistent, or on the personal preexistence of Christ, it would seem to me. The Arians and Athanasians would have to be right in their claim that Christ existed as a person before his birth, and that this person, in fact, abandoned his previous mode of existence in order to become a human being. This precisely is what any views of personal preexistence must find in the texts in Philippians 2 and Colossians 1. What we are questioning here is whether several crucial terms mean, in this context and in Scripture as a whole, what they are popularly interpreted to mean. Let's begin by examining the word translated firstborn, prototokos. This word is used a number of times in Scripture, often to designate the child born first in a family. Obviously, it means that. When Esau came to his father Isaac to receive the blessing that was due him, he pleaded the fact that he was Isaac's firstborn, his prototokos, as the Septuagint translates the text. Jacob, the second-born son, had already deceived his father and received the blessing intended for Esau. The custom of conferring special privileges or a major inheritance on the firstborn son is not only seen in the Bible, but also in the later laws of primogeniture in England and other countries, awarding the family inheritance to the eldest son. There is, however, in Scripture, a further meaning of the term prototokos. Since the Greek word protos can mean either first in time or first in rank, the term firstborn may be used to designate one who is honored with first or chief position regardless of time of birth. That's a very important point there. This idea is seen in Exodus 4:22, where God commands Moses to tell Pharaoh, "This is what Yahweh says. Israel is my firstborn son. Let my son go so he may worship me." Clearly here the word prototokos has nothing to do with precedence in time, or little, if anything, but rather precedence in rank among the nations. This is what is being stressed, it seems, as God views their relative importance. Israel is his firstborn. Israel, the nation of Israel, is the one that first of all matters in God's sight. The same is true in Jeremiah 31:9, where God calls Ephraim his prototokos, even though Ephraim's brother Manasseh was the elder of the two. Ephraim was the preeminent one in rank over Manasseh. Again, it is precedence in rank or importance that is in view. The classic example of this usage is found in Psalm 89:27, where God describes in glowing words the promised Davidic king, the Messiah. "I will also appoint him my firstborn, the most exalted of the kings of the earth." God will appoint him that. This foremost position of kings is a matter of appointment, not time of birth. I think this is crucially important. These facts and this usage as to the word firstborn may well have much significance in helping us to understand how and why Christ can be called the firstborn of all creation in Colossians 1:15. If prototokos is selected in Colossians 1:15 and then again in 1:18 to express this supremacy, this is because of the great importance which the term firstborn took on as a word for rank in the Old Testament and then retained in later Judaism. This is from the Baker's Dictionary of Theology. The NIV calls Christ the firstborn over all creation, while the NASB has firstborn of all creation, reflecting a literal translation of the genitive case. King James also translates the genitive literally, the firstborn of every creature. The NASB renderings and King James renderings could be interpreted to imply that Christ was the first created being, just as the Arians believed. They understood first to refer to precedence in time. That is why Arius declared that there was a time when he was not, that is, before his being created. It was this that the Athanasians rejected so vehemently, insisting that he was eternal, begotten in eternity before all time. To them, this meant he was co-eternal with the Father, and therefore himself God. But I think the NIV has got a point here in translating it the firstborn over all creation, recognizing that the point of the genitive here is rather to express his relationship in preeminence to that creation. It is necessary at this point to consider whether Paul uses the word creation here in reference to the original creation of Genesis 1, or whether he may have in mind what may be called the new creation. Paul goes on to define this creation in the text as comprising all things, quote, in heaven and earth, visible and invisible, and then he specifies what those all things are, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things were created by him and for him. Certainly, it was Christ himself who described the original creation as being God's work in Mark 13:19, and you may compare Hebrews 4:4, where God, not Jesus, rested from the work of creation, suggesting that Christ did not see himself as the creator of the all things mentioned in Genesis 1:31. Where it says God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. Christ himself says that that was God's creation in Mark 13:19. Paul, in fact, seems to give an exact description of what he means by these particular all things that he says are created, namely thrones, powers, rulers, authorities. If this is what he means, then we must ask in what sense Christ can be called the creator of such or of these. Just before his ascension, Christ said that all authority in heaven and on earth had now been given to him. With that authority, he commissioned his apostles to go into all the world and make disciples of all the nations, and to teach them all his commands. Moses had foretold that Messiah would be a prophet like Moses himself, whose word would have the force of law, demanding obedience. And that, in effect, I see as the new covenant. You might even call it new Torah if you're using that term with respect to Jewish believers. But what about his authority, quote, in heaven? Jesus said he had now been given all authority in heaven and earth. Paul says that when Christ was raised from the dead, he was set at God's right hand in the heavenlies. His new position brought him to a status far above all rule and authority, power and dominion, and every title that can be given, not only in the present age, but also in the one to come, Ephesians 1:21. Not only that, but God placed all things under his feet.